Thanks, Jane. Okay, members. Borida, my name is Councillor Cheryl Carlisle and I'm the Chair of the Finance and Resources Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Can I welcome everyone to the meeting, which is a multi-location meeting. The meeting will be live streamed and recorded and will be available for viewing after the meeting. Should the live stream fail, the meeting will continue and a recording will be available through the Council's website following the conclusion of the meeting. Can I remind members that translation facilities are available? If you want to make use of this facility, please select the English language option on the microphone delegate unit if you're in the chamber, and for those attending remotely by clicking on the audio settings tab and selecting English. For those wishing to speak in the chamber, please indicate by raising your hand and turn on your microphone when it's your turn to speak. In order for those online to be able to hear the translation at all times, for those remote attendees wishing to speak, please use the yellow hand function. When I call your name to speak, at that point, please press the push to speak button. If you have a point of order, just press the push to speak button. Committee members will be allowed to have their say first, and the relevant cabinet members will be brought in as and when appropriate, with non-committee members then being given the opportunity to speak. In order to maintain your place in the speaker queue when asking a question, please leave your microphone on until you've received a response and ask any supplementary questions. It would be helpful if members could ask all their questions in one go. Whilst I do not wish to stifle debate, can I remind members that any questions should be focused on the subject matter and to avoid repetition. For those attending remotely, please note that those in the chamber will be unable to use the chat facility. Remote attendees, if you do need to leave the meeting temporarily, please pop a message in the chat function. I expect everyone present and participating in this meeting to conduct themselves appropriately and be respectful to each other. That applies to members, officers and members of the press or public attending. Okay, we move on to item 1, apologies for absence. Sally?
Apologies have been received from councillors Frank Bradfield, Charlie McCoubrey and Andrew Wood.
Lovely, thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. Have we any? No? Okay, thanks members. And item 3, urgent matters. There are none. Item 4, minutes. To approve and sign as the correct record the minutes of our previous meeting, pages 4 to 9. Could I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Councillor Nia has proposed. And Councillor John online has seconded. Could you show, please, members? Thank you. Anyone against? Any abstentions? No, those are carried. Deal. Item 5, questions to cabinet members. There are none this week. And we move on to item 6, to review the forward work programme. Jane Jones, our scrutiny lead officer, will provide us with the update. Thank you, Jane.
Good morning, members. Before you are the forward work programmes. For your information, I have just one update, and that's to let you all know the waste transfer station project report is currently being reviewed and it should be with you shortly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane. And for members' information, we've now, you should have had the calendar invites for the budget working groups in the autumn, which is really helpful. And thank you to Councillor Chris following our discussions about that. Really helpful to get those in early. Okay, any comments on the forward work? Oh, Councillor Anne online.
Morning, Chair. Thanks very much for that. Just a quickie, it's on page 17 and it's to do with the budget working groups. I think last time I did ask what was our strategy going to be in terms of budget working groups for this financial year. And I think we were supposed to have some sort of feedback. We haven't had any, but you're right, we've had the working groups populated into our calendars, which means therefore potentially nothing will happen until November. I'm just concerned, given our precarious financial position, we need to be really a lot cleverer and smarter and faster off the pace this year. So I wonder if there's an answer to my question of last time about what's our strategy going to be, how are we going to approach this, and how can members get involved to help. address the shortfall. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Anne. Councillor Chris Cater, Cabinet Member for Finance.
Thank you very much for that, Anne. You've come in just at the right time on that, because I will be working on something with Amanda and Gareth to send out to all members just in preparation for that, and we'll try and get that out as early as possible. Okay, Councillor Anne, thanks.
You content, Councillor Anne?
Yeah, I look forward to it. Obviously, sooner rather than later would be really good. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? No. In that case, could we have a proposer and seconder to approve the forward work programme? Councillor Neer again, Councillor Gareth. If everyone would like to show in favour. Thank you. And anyone against? Any abstentions? No, that's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you for that, Jane. Okay, we move on to item 7, and we have got the performance self-assessment, October 2025 to March 2026, and you'll find that on pages 46 to 187. Excuse me. Councillor Dilwyn Roberts, the Cabinet Member for Culture, Leisure and Governance Services, is going to introduce the report, and Yola McGregor, Strategy, Performance and Engagement Manager, is going to present the report. Diolch. Councillor Dilwyn. Oh, you're on mute there, Dilwyn. Press the push to speak bar.
There we are.
Yes, excellent.
Oh, there we are. Yeah, hello. Thank you. Indeed, man.
Yes, a lot of work has gone into this. I don't think there won't be any advantage for me to start reading through this report. With your permission, Chair, I'm going to ask Yola to go through the report with you. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Dilwyn, that's brief this morning, but straight to the chase. Yola, if you'd like to come in then, thank you.
Good morning, Pawb. Before I start, I'd like to give my thanks to Rachel Brooks in my team and also the wider team for their contributions to this report. It's a significant piece of work and I couldn't do it without their contributions. This report has been to governance and audit already, and I spoke mostly there about the sort of the technical process behind producing the report and the improvements we've made. I'm not going to dwell too much on that, but nonetheless, I will just highlight to members some of the key improvements to this report. We have introduced to our executive summary now, page 56 of your... Page 56 of your packs, an at-a-glance dashboard, which just brings the high-level sort of overview, a basket of key indicators for us to keep an eye on. It's very much a first stab. It's a first draft. I imagine it will evolve as time goes on. We've introduced as well new stakeholder survey data. Members will remember that we had an engagement survey out in the autumn. So we're glad at last we're able to bring that data into our reports to complete what I call the sort of the triangle of our evidence around the self-assessment. We've also introduced 4 RAG colours now to our performance measures. We've not yet rolled it out to activity. We need to do some further development work there with the software that we use, but that will come in time. But it is in place for measures now, so we're looking at red, orange, yellows and greens to give us a more mature understanding of our performance trends. So I'll just run through, I think, some of the highlights from not just this report, but also the earlier report that members would have had in December. So this is our year-end report, so I will just briefly go through some of the key things that I think stands out. So for Goal 1, our Resilient Council, we've continued to strengthen financial resilience arrangements, including the implementation of our new core financial system, brings new financial management control, transparency and forecasting capabilities. We have, by the end of the year, achieved 89% of forecast savings and maintained strong council tax collection rates, even in challenging circumstances. We've also significantly expanded the use of digital tools, with now more than 1,000 staff using AI-enabled technology to support day-to-day work. This is compared to just 115 last year. For our environment work, of surveyed streets, cleanliness has remained at 100%, while reported fly tipping incidences have fallen. The county's resilience to climate impacts has improved, with 6,152 additional properties better protected from flooding. Progress has continued through biodiversity projects and active travel improvements, including new tree planting, habitat work, and the new bridge linking Glenconwy to Llandudno Junction. 530 safety defects were identified on roads and pavements, 88% of which were completed within target time, which is a 4% improvement compared to the previous year. And we've continued to perform well for waste reused, recycled or composted at around 70%. Conwy has retained Level 5 Green Dragon Environmental Accreditation for the 11th consecutive year, and 10 parks achieved Green Flag Award status. Moving on to Prosperous and Learning, we've continued work to support employment, skills and learning across the year, including 51 apprenticeships and 47 work experience placements. We've supported 212 staff into employment, with our employment hub receiving a Silver Professional Excellence Award. We've secured 14.5 million in external funding to support regeneration, communities and businesses. The restoration and reopening of Llandudno's historic colonnade has helped to preserve an important local landmark whilst improving safety and accessibility, jointly funded by the UK Government and Welsh Government. Welsh Government investment was secured to improve facilities at Porth Erias, responding to growing demand from residents, visitors and organised beach activities. The refurbishment of the Alice Trail in Llandudno was completed with UK Government funding, helping to strengthen the town's visitor offer and celebrate its cultural identity. Our overall cultural offer and participation has remained strong, with high attendance across all of our venues and events. Looking to schools, the percentage of pupils accessing Welsh medium education has increased. Primary school attendance and secondary school attendance has increased. Our youth service received national and international recognition, including Bronze Quality Mark renewal in youth work in Wales, and inclusion in a European Good Practice Guide. The voice of young people was also strengthened through expanded youth council representation across scrutiny committees. Within housing, we've delivered 100 new affordable homes and returned 86 long-term empty homes into use. I know the head of housing was hopeful that we could include in this report data around new builds as well. Unfortunately, the data is not yet validated, but it is also an encouraging picture there. But that will come in the next report. 3,016 households were supported to live independently. 9 new supported housing flats opened in Colwyn Bay, helping people move on from homelessness towards independent living. And the number of households in temporary accommodation reduced in the number of while the number of bed and breakfasts, those accommodated in bed and breakfasts, also fell. Looking to well-being, leisure participation has continued to grow, with over 1,300,000 attendances, and fit memberships have also increased again. Health and well-being infrastructure has been expanded, including the opening of the new Fit Conwy gym at Ysgol Creuddyn, alongside investment in wider leisure and play facilities. Fit Conwy's first gymnastics competition brought together more than 200 gymnasts and trampoline competitors, highlighting our commitment to inclusive participation in sport. Bryneirin Nurseries and Cafe continue to provide meaningful work opportunities and support for people with disabilities. Within Addol's Children Assessment Centre opened, helping keep children with complex needs closer to home and within their communities. Libraries have continued to provide valuable community spaces, meeting all 13 Welsh public library standards, and combining strong standards of service with inclusive activities that support reading, well-being, and connection. Community safety and safeguarding was strengthened through enhanced CCTV, enforcement activity, safeguarding improvement work, and continued partnership working. Then finally, just looking to governance improvements, we've obviously completed our first panel performance assessment within the period, providing a positive independent view alongside clear recommendation for improvement. Performance, risk and asset management frameworks have been refreshed, strengthening governance, accountability and long-term planning. Inclusive Conwy and workforce initiatives have expanded, including staff networks, learning and development and anti-racism work. Partnership working has strengthened through social partnership arrangements, regional initiatives, and place-based collaboration. And last but not least, Welsh language development has continued to strengthen through Ein Llais Cymraeg strategy and wider promotional activity. So on the whole, I'd like to leave members with a positive impression of what the Council has achieved throughout the year, but I'm happy to take any questions on the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Iolo. A comprehensive run through of that for us. Just a housekeeping point. Could you possibly make sure that when you do in future reports that you put the name of the cabinet member when you do consultation? A lot of the reports today haven't got the cabinet member's name in the consultation. It's really helpful for members of the public when they're reading these reports. Thank you. Okay, members. Questions, comments. First, Councillor Gareth.
Right, yeah, thanks, Yola. And as you say, there's a huge amount of positive work going on and a huge amount of positive trends within the report. But I'm going to put a downer on it and focus and ask a couple of questions on the trends that seem to be getting worse. And one of the ones is the council tax collection, which is edging towards that 95%. Which is a double-edged sword in that it actually puts financial strain or pressure on the financial resilience of the council because we're not actually collecting in the money that we thought we were going to get. But probably more worryingly, it actually puts strain on the financial resilience of our householders and our population because it means that there's more people getting into financial difficulty. And I was just wondering, is that trend worse than other councils and how does it benchmark against other councils? And also, is there a link between that sign of financial pressure on our households and with the homeless prevention rates, which is again showing a worse trend? Is there a link between people initially failing to pay their council tax and then ending up at risk of homelessness? And do we look to spot this early in the council tax collection and actually put some support in and that early identification of people who could end up as homeless?
Thank you, Councillor Gareth. Gareth, you're going to answer. Gareth, good morning.
Thank you, Councillor Gareth. I think what we're seeing is a national picture. It's not just a Conway picture. What we do have, the days have gone where you used to be able to compare council tax collection in one authority with another, and the main reason for that is the premium, because there's different rates of premium in various different councils. Obviously, we've gone as far as anybody else has gone with the premium, and that's factored into the collection rate. I think, so in spite of that, our collection is holding up. I think we were 8th in Wales this year. So considering what I've just said around the premium, that's obviously a good result. I guess that answers the benchmarking question that you mentioned. But it's clear, if you look at the trends over the last 4 or 5 years, that it is a declining picture nationally in terms of collection rates, and there's only so far, in my view, that it can go before it becomes an even bigger problem than it is now. In terms of us not collecting what we were anticipating, I think we are collecting what we anticipated, because although the collection rate is below 96%, obviously there's arrears that we're collecting as well, so we are achieving the budgeted collection rate at the moment. But it's inevitable, if it continues on the trajectory that it's on, that's going to come under pressure as well in future years. In terms of the homeless prevention rate, I haven't got any information with me here specifically around that. What I do know is that the service and Sue and the team do work closely in supporting both those members of the community who are finding it difficult to pay, but also with other teams within the authority in terms of what support, and obviously within the revenue service, they've got the benefit service that work closely with them as well around the council tax reduction support as well. So there are those mechanisms that are long-standing mechanisms that are in place there, but it's an area where
Like I said, obviously there's been some discussions and there's been some work around consultation on council tax and how that might change in the future as well, and we'll have to watch this space on that one. But it can't continue, I don't think, on the path that it's been on for the last 4 or 5 years.
Thank you. And as I said, I think it's an important early indicator, possibly, for those child poverty and for homelessness things. And if we can get in early, then hopefully it might actually save a larger cost later on. But more importantly, actually put our residents in a better position or help them cope if we can get in at those early stages, rather than let it get to the stage where the arrears are so much and they're probably behind with their rent or their mortgage that they actually can't get themselves out of the hole they're in. Thank you.
Thank you both. Next speaker we've got is Callum. Morning, Callum. Nice to see you.
Diolch, Chair. I just want to draw members' attentions to one of the titles in the report with mandatory safeguarding training. So the percentage of new staff who take their mandatory safeguarding training, the percentage of those who have is 53%. So nearly half of new staff haven't completed their mandatory training for safeguarding. Now, there's probably a lot of gaps that need to be filled there, which I hope you will. One of them being is, how long do staff have to have in order to complete their mandatory safeguarding training? The other one being, I'm under the assumption that this is probably a part of a universal induction package where you'd have your safeguarding training included. So my supplementary question is, why is it so low, 53%? And the final question is, the year end for the benchmark is much higher. So year end 23-24 is nearly 60%, whereas the year end 25-26 is only 53. Why is it getting worse? And I assume there must be a quite a good reason for it. But I just wanted to draw attention to that because it seems extremely low to what it should be. Diolch.
Thank you for that, Callum. Yeah, really good points. Yolo, you're going to take this. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. This is a measure that has caused me headaches over many of these reports. We've done a lot of work to understand the background picture. Why is this data as low as it is? Fundamentally, the answer is that the process that we have for collecting the information across all of our services, it's not connected. It's very disaggregated. So, for example, schools do their safeguarding training on a different cycle to the rest of the authority. They also use different systems to capture that sort of information. So whenever this is queried, I'm quick to say the measure is wrong. At best, you can probably take it as a sample, but I wouldn't even put much faith in that. This will be rectified because I know HR colleagues are looking into a new training system to implement, which hopefully will capture a far more encouraging picture. Just in response to how long staff have, I believe until this month, staff had to take a 6-month probationary period. But with new employment regulations, that's reducing now, I think, to 5 months. So certainly within 5 months of a probationary period, all staff should have completed this training, which is part of a suite of mandatory training. Yeah, I think hopefully I've answered your queries there.
Brilliant. Yeah, I thought there'd be a reason because that is extremely low. So have you got any immediate data on the actual figure for the council only? What percentage of the council staff have completed their own respective mandatory safeguarding training?
Not to hand, no. We haven't done the work to disaggregate just sort of office-based staff, I assume you're asking.
Yeah.
No, we haven't done that. Well, I haven't done that analysis. I'm sure HR colleagues have. But if you would like that figure, I can ask colleagues to provide.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you, Yolo. Yes, if we could circulate that figure to this committee afterwards, and if we could have that included in future reports, would be really helpful. The Chief Exec wants to come in. Reen?
Yeah, it's a very important question Callum raises, and it was discussed at Corporate Safeguarding Board last week, or the week before, and we specifically referenced exactly the points you're making around the difference in the 60% to 53%, but also how low that figure is. I think Yolo's touched on one of the elements, which is the system itself, which isn't the greatest system, and we're looking at the options there that will make it easier for people to access. However, one thing that we have bringing in is that managers shouldn't be signing people off for their probationary period until they've actually done the safeguarding training. So that's also coming in. So that should also help in terms of that rate going up. I always give the analogy here around if you were starting work in a kitchen somewhere, you'd have to do health and safety training. Well, this is such a fundamental part of the thing of what we do as an authority. We should be doing this earlier than the 5 months. It shouldn't wait till that last week in that probationary period to do it. You should be doing it in that first period when you come in, as you say, Callum, when you have those set of introductory courses that you have to do. That this should be done as a precursor really to what you're doing within the authority. So we are messaging around it. There has been discussion at managers forum. There's also been discussion at senior manager level. So I'm hopeful that will turn around. With all those things coming together, we should be able to turn things around. But it's an incredibly important part of what we do, and we should be pushing it. And also that the information that you're requesting around that wider figure is definitely something that should be shared. So there.
Really quick, sorry, just on one of those points you made about managers signing off. Has that been practiced in the local authority where managers would sign off the probation without the mandatory safeguarding happening? Because it defeats the point of it being mandatory then, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where maybe there was inconsistency in terms of how it was operating. You would expect that to happen, but that messaging has certainly been emphasised now that should happen. And that is aligned with that 5-month period that Yolo mentioned. It sort of brings it closer as well. So hopefully all that packages together should have an impact. Hopefully the next time we have a report, we should see an impact with it.
Thank you very much.
Does this keep going on? Thank you very much for that, Callum, and for the responses. Next, we've got Councillor Anne online.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Yolo, for a really significant report. And your presentation for me really recognises the breadth and depth of the responsibilities that this council has to discharge. And very much those services are ones that our residents need and value. So, you know, all the positives that have been outlined within the report and your presentation, I much appreciate. And I also welcome the stakeholder input into the report because that's really good to see the perception as opposed to some of the facts and figures, because both are important. Financial resilience is always my sort of key focus, and one of the areas I just want to perhaps ask a couple of questions on today are around absenteeism and labour turnover. I think sometimes particularly in public services, the connection isn't particularly appreciated about the costs of absenteeism, and I mean the financial costs and the costs of labour turnover. And our figures for absenteeism at 11.78 and labour turnover at 10.74 are really, really high. And they represent not only financial cost, but skills and experience drain as well. I'm really keen to see these figure lower as the monies involved could be more productively used in serving our communities and delivering improved outcomes. So, unfortunately, I tend to say this year in, year out. So my question is, because it's not clear from within the report, how do we compare against North Wales and Pan Wales councils in those figures that I've just mentioned? And when can we actually start to monetize the costs of both absence and labour turnover so that our teams and our managers and our senior managers really can focus on the real costs and the impact of those costs that drain away productivity? So 2 questions there on absence and labour turnover. Thanks, Yolo.
Thank you, Councillor Anne. Yolo.
Thank you for those questions, Councillor. I think the thing to stress with the attendance figure is it is improving. There's been a great deal of emphasis and focus given to staff attendance over the last year, and thankfully we are seeing the figures going in the right direction. In terms of the turnover of staff, it did stand out to me when this report was produced. I thought, oh, is that high? I don't know. So I had a conversation with HR colleagues, and there is no concern there that this is an unusual picture. I think in terms of monetizing these things, that's certainly something that the actions from the panel performance assessment will be looking at going forward, but I don't want to jump into the next item. And I don't know if Amanda or anyone else would like to come in on that point.
Thank you, Yola. Thank you, Councillor Anne. Yeah, just on the point about monetising it, I think I think there's a couple of points to make about the cost. I guess is I think in some instances there obviously is an actual cost. Well, I mean, a additional cash cost for certain absence, because obviously if for argument's sake, a person on the waste collection is unwell, then clearly an agency person or a cover arrangement has to be brought in to ensure that the round can still happen, etc. So there's an actual, as a result of that absence, not only are you losing that time of the permanent member of staff, but you're also then having to buy in an additional resource to cover. Obviously, then when you come more to office-based staff, so if I use myself as an example, if I'm off sick for the day, then nobody's brought in to cover me, but nonetheless, obviously there's a salary, my day's salary is being paid and the council is not receiving productivity for that. So I guess as I say, there's two elements to cost. There's real additional cost, and there is lost productivity. So I think in terms of how we gather that, I think we'd have to put quite complex arrangements in place to explicitly gather, which bit of additional overtime or additional agency or whatever is pertaining to sickness as compared to pertaining to other things. And in terms of the notional cost, then, again, to work that out on a individual basis would be incredibly complex and cumbersome, and I would therefore suggest we would have to do it based on an average salary or something like that. So I suppose whilst I absolutely understand the point about obviously there's a cost attached, I guess I would question the relative merit of collecting it in the context if you could put quite cumbersome and costly systems in place to gather a figure which is a notional figure to be presented, which so what, for want of a better word. So for me personally, I think actually monitoring it from a point of view of number of days and monitoring it from a point of view of rates feels the more pertinent way of measuring it, notwithstanding, as you say, perhaps what we do need to do is emphasise clearly there is a cost, and maybe people don't make that connection in the same way. When we come on to turnover, then again, obviously there are costs. We probably could quantify, the cost of the teams in terms of the recruitment processes, and we obviously have got external costs in terms of advertising and those kind of things. I know there's been a recent Wales audit report about recruitment. Apologies, I can't remember the exact detail of that, but I think it was favourable in the context of what we're doing as an authority, and I'll pick up whether there was any sort of benchmarking around how we compare on our turnover rates and come back on that. But I guess I'd just make those observations about the financial side of it. Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. I must admit, I mean, I was a bit shocked hearing you say that there's no concern about the levels, and in fact that we think it's going down in terms of absenteeism. I mean, 12 days per full-time employee is a significant amount of lost time. And obviously there always will be sickness absence, so that's a given. But I suppose with a private sector background, it's really shocking to see the high level of both absence and labour turnover, and actually that we don't have a concern about it here in this report in terms of finance and resources. So I just want to make that point. I mean, I have asked in the past for us to monetize the hidden costs, if you like, of absence and potentially labour turnover. And it would be a notional figure. It wouldn't be complex statistics, individual to whatever. It's an internal control and focus mechanism, really. And maybe, you know, given the comment about no concern, that may be something that is really more important than I think we've actually considered to date, because I think those figures are really worrying in the context of our financial crisis. And we need to look at how we actually maintain productivity and get value for money of every penny that we spend. So thanks for the answers, but those are my concerns and they remain, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Anne. I'll bring the Chief Exec in. And my comment on that was I thought the new framework that we signed up to, was it 2 years ago, would address this data collection and sort of financial balances issue. So, Reen, if you'd like to.
Yeah, I wouldn't want the comments of our HR colleagues to be misconstrued. They're not here today, so I'm sure they would have a view, and also they would have more information around that benchmarking, because I think the context, and I'm talking for Yola here, I think the context is, in comparison to other public sector bodies, that we're not an outlier is what that concern point that Yola was making, not that the figure isn't a concern. Clearly, a high figure of absence or turnover is a concern, and it's something that we are constantly monitoring and looking at. I would also make the point is that the important element here is the why, isn't it, around why we're having turnover at that level and what we're doing to address that. And I know our HR colleagues have been looking at the exit interviews, etc., and as the patterns. But we do know that it's a national picture around public sector generally, around those figures being high, and also in various parts of the authority you're competing against higher wages in other sectors, etc. So it's not necessarily an internal issue, it's a market issue at times. So it is complicated, and I know you understand that, and I'm not formally saying that you don't. But I think it's clear that we do need that benchmarking to see where we are and where we sit, and it's something that we've been calling for really nationally. And the audit report that Amanda refers to, it relates to us, but it would be good, and I've raised this with Audit Wales, around their position about getting this information from all local authorities is an important one, isn't it? Because it gives us that grounding then about where we sit, because it's very difficult. It's always difficult to compare public and private sector because of the various differences between the sectors. What we can do is compare with each other within the public sector, and what does good look like? I think that's always a good place to start. What if somebody's doing it better? Why? So we'll look into that, Anne, and I guess it is a complex picture, and I know you've raised this before, but we will try and get more information as Amanda's indicated.
Yeah, and I would really appreciate as well, Reen, that we, going forward, include benchmarking figures from across Wales within the report, because a level of this detail, that would be the expectation of us as Finance and Resources members. But in fairness to you, I did have a look myself online, and I couldn't find any figures other than 2 years old as far as across Wales. So, you know, the fact that you've already challenged Audit Wales is encouraging, because we all need up-to-date figures, don't we, to really understand what's going on and how we can improve. Thanks.
Thank you, Anne. Reen has somehow become demoted to a councillor. He's now Councillor Cheryl Carlisle. You have not got the hair for it, really. You absolutely haven't. I'm not sure what's happening there. We're trying to sort it out. Before we move off this, I've got several other questioners now. Staff survey, when is this coming? It was last October, and I've asked repeatedly for our staff survey to come. It's in 10 months now, is it? My maths correct?
I believe the staff survey ran towards the end of the last calendar year.
Yeah.
We had to delay the analysis because of the panel performance assessment. My team were involved in hosting that and also analysing the stakeholder survey that came before it. It hasn't been 10 months since the staff survey. As to when that report is coming, I know managers have met to discuss an action plan in response to it. I've asked, you've raised that question with me twice now, I think, in the last week, and I've asked the head of HR when that would be tabled, but unfortunately she's on leave at the moment, so the response I don't have yet.
Because that would give us an accurate picture, wouldn't it, of some of the issues that Councillor Anne is talking about. Okay, so what have we got next? Let's have a look. We've got Councillor Gareth, Councillor Gromway, then Councillor Paul.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for letting me come back again. I just got a follow-up question on the safeguarding side of things. In the unfortunate event that something untoward happened with somebody who hadn't gone through the safeguarding training, are we confident that we've fulfilled our corporate responsibility and we can't be held corporately responsible because the stats show that we've got an issue? Have we got enough mitigants in place to say that actually, we are doing something about this, we've recognised it, and we've got measures in place that despite what the stats show that we've got an issue, that we can't be held corporately responsible for ignoring the side of things if something went wrong?
Yes, I would point to my earlier answer in terms of what we recognise in terms of those new starters. Certainly, we have processes in place in terms of it's a mandatory course. There are refreshers every year. There is a lag with data collection, so it's not necessarily the situation at that time. So there's because people tend to, and what we'll see is new starters will have done their original one at a certain point, and their refresher comes 3 years later. So the stats, the corporate stats, which we will share, it's a higher number, but clearly we want it as high as possible. So I think we've got robust processes in place. I think we've got a really active corporate safeguarding board that reflects on these things constantly, and the messaging and the information that runs through that and goes to staff is regular. And I would say that we have quite robust processes in place in Conwy. Having chaired that board for a long time, yes, you'd always want your stats in terms of training to be higher, but the new starters are the ones that are the point here, and we're making really good progress on changing things in order to hopefully bring those up. So yes is the answer. I'm pretty confident that it is a priority. It's a corporate priority, has always been a corporate priority, and we will be pushing again for those numbers to be higher still. The corporate numbers also, of course, it doesn't mean that they haven't undertaken training. They will have undertaken training. A lot of that will be the refresher, whether that comes through or not into those stats. So yeah, we'll bring those forward for you.
Okay, that's all I wanted, was that reassurance that we can defend ourselves if needs be, because as councillors, obviously, if you see stats, then you've got a responsibility to make sure that something, the appropriate action's been done for it, just in case something goes horribly wrong. Diolch.
Thank you, dear Councillor Gareth. Councillor, Yolo, you wanted to come back in.
Sorry, thank you. Just going back to Councillor Ann's query, I've been multitasking over here. I've managed to find some benchmarking data for Conwy. For working days, we're below the Welsh median. And for staff exiting the authority, we're actually, I think, below the lowest quartile. So in terms of positive performance, so exiting staff here 500, for example, whereas at the top of the table you've got 1,800 leaving. So we're well down in terms of our position.
Councillor Anne, she's gone off. We've got too many microphones on at the moment. Thank you very much for that, Yolo. Okay, next is Councillor Gronwy, then we go to Councillor Paul. Thank you.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah. Just following on from Anne's point about absenteeism, it is an old problem with the authority is actually maintaining a workforce that's fit for purpose, because inevitably when staff are off, we sometimes rely on agency and one thing and another, and the quality of workmanship or the performance often suffers. And I'm aware that from my previous role ERF, when you bring an agency, you lose that continuity, that experience of when you're dealing with things like verge cutting, for instance, which is just happening in my area now, where you bring in contractors or agency and they don't have that experience or local knowledge of delivering a service that we previously delivered in-house. So I'm aware that recruiting has been a problem in ERF as well. When I was cabinet member for ERF, getting skilled workers, because of the rates of pay we offer, often makes it difficult to recruit people for those roles. I have two sons that used to work for the authority. No, they no longer work for the authority, and I'm aware that the rate of pay they attract in the sectors they're in now are probably far greater than we offer. Whilst we do offer additional things to our staff, such as pensions and the contributions we make to staff contributions is applaudable, but in this day and age, that in itself is not always enough. And then the working conditions of some of the staff in our ERF has been a challenge for many years, as we know. Some of our depots are old and are not fit for purpose, and that's why we've been looking at that over the years to try and improve their working conditions. But we have no figures, like I see, as far as sickness in schools, and how is that monitored and how is that calculated, and the cost to the education of our children how is that measured and monitored is the other one. And I was just looking at page 140 here on the report, so 140 or 74, depends which number you look at, and it's surveys and managing performance. The perception is that we don't manage performance well. Managing risks and challenges, we don't manage well. That's a perception. And long-term planning. Now, I do have concerns about long-term planning, especially looking at our schools. Where is the long-term planning? We keep on going on about the 21st Century Schools programme, but we've been held back mainly because of Welsh Government funding to deliver what we would like to achieve in Conway. But I think we do need to look at how we manage skills better, how we look at the risks going forward. You know, I'm aware of having sat on the schools loan panel this year that more and more schools are coming for loans. So that is not sustainable, in my opinion. We need to be looking how we can make our education delivery better in filling empty school places. So there are a number of things I think we need to challenge, and I welcome the report. It identifies an awful lot of good practice, but there are areas of risk, and a lot to do that is with staffing and maintaining staff at an appropriate level.
Dear Councillor Gronwy. Yolo?
Thank you, Councillor. I know when I introduced the stakeholder survey to the report, and we were consulting around what questions were going to be, the questions around governance particularly, they're not the most exciting or engaging questions. But I remember when I said then, the important thing is that we listen to the data that we get out of this. We mustn't make excuses for the questions that we've asked or the reports that we've asked. Nonetheless, I'm going to make an excuse for those performance and risk questions. They're not the most engaging. And unless you have sat through our committees and you've read our reports, then you perhaps won't be as au fait with the work of the council and the performance of the council. Nonetheless, I do agree there is an important message there that we do need to listen to. and we will doubtless take that forward as well through some of the panel performance assessment recommendations that have made recommendations around how we share information and how we bring forward performance information. In terms of the sickness absence, whether or not it includes schools, I believe it does. I think the overall figure that we provide, that counts school staff within that figure. So we do have that breakdown.
You happy there, Councillor Gromway? Yeah, lovely. Okay. We now go on to Councillor Paul. Thank you for your.
Do you want to take Anne?
Oh, is that up there? Yes, Councillor Anne.
Yeah, it's not in relation to absenteeism. Just a quickie on page 161, which is headed up managing and disposing of council assets. The report actually said that Cabinet approved the disposal of the Conway Civic Hall and the nearby council-owned land. Now, that's not my recollection of what came through democracy. My recollection was that we approved that we would go out to test the market on the disposal of the civic with additional council land. The decision whether to dispose of the additional land and the civic, in fact, would be subject to having received the market sort of test survey data and any interest. So I just didn't want this report, if my memory is correct, to reflect an incorrect decision, if that's how I see it. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Anne. That tallies with my recollection of what happened as well. Yolo.
Yeah, thanks for that, Councillor Anne. Always good to have extra eyes. I'll go back and double check and rephrase that. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, dear Councillor Anne. Okay, Councillor Paul. And contrary to the email that all members received this morning, I'd just like to make the point that on this committee, I welcome all questions, all debates, be it cross-party, backbench. There's never been stifling of debate on this committee, and I just want to make that very clear. So, Councillor Paul, the floor is yours.
And I certainly acknowledge that, Chair. You've always been very generous to me, whether I was a committee member or not a committee member. So I've always valued that. First of all, let's acknowledge this is a positive report and is significantly better than we previously had on poor performance reporting. So let's acknowledge that, and let's also acknowledge that means there's lots of good people out there doing good work each day, and that's the key message I think we need to say. And the fact that we will focus today on concerns, shouldn't sort of devalue that. Now, on the points that have been made by Gareth Gromway and about financial resilience, I'm going to leave those comments to the next report because I think they're almost more valid. So I'm only going to focus on a couple of things. One, on just building on the safeguarding discussion that we've had. The issue for me there is as always around safeguarding is the rigour of professional scrutiny, and therefore those professional officers scrutinising mandatory safeguarding training and other mandatory training. It is about that professional curiosity, and I think it's also about means to an end. And if I can give this isn't an officer situation, but as a councillor, I know on a governing body, for example, there's been constant requests. Why can't we have this training in person? Because of the difficulties that some governors, maybe a majority of governors, find with the hub system that we have, the IT hub system. And that seems to me, if you've got a cohort of people who are not up to date on their mandatory training, why not? Let's be very flexible and find solutions. I'd say that also as a councillor, because on the refresher courses after 3 years, I've flagged up the particular problem in accessing that on an iPad rather than on your laptop. And there certainly have been some problems. I don't know if those have now been worked out. But again, I personally, on all this training, I'd much prefer an in-person training, even if it means I have to come into somewhere, because I think it's the engagement with colleagues and the professional officers which you get the richest learning from, rather than just I would call quite a lot of the IT training a tick box. In fact, I did one of the mandatory courses, and I was successful without watching any of the videos because we couldn't get the videos up. So, you know, the reality is that the system, in my view, doesn't work. I think there needs to be much more professional leadership curiosity in why it's not working. If it's not working for one of our employees, if it's not working for one of our governors, if it's not working for one of our councillors, that's where we need to focus on that. So I'm happy for that question to be answered first, and then I've just got one other question.
No, that's fine, Paul. And yes, that seems to be a problem across the board, because when you do the training, it's actually printing off the certificates to prove you've done the training is incredibly challenging. But Reen wants to come in on that.
It's an absolutely fair point, and it's something on the professional curiosity point. It's certainly something that we have been engaging with, and we are looking at a new system that will make it easier for people to access the system, to undertake the training, and that's all staff, all members, and hopefully governors as well. So that's definitely one part of the solution, I think, to this. If you can make it easier to access, you know, it takes me ages to find the password, you know, and that in itself is a problem, isn't it? If you can't find the password to access the system, that's going to put people off. So we need to make it as easy as we possibly can for everyone to access the system. And maybe Amanda's got more detail around where we're up to with that system, but I know we're looking at procuring a new system.
I can confirm. We are. In fact, it came through our internal processes not so long ago to go out to procurement. So we are going to be procuring a system called Thinky, which is a system that we know is also used across a number of other local authorities, and we've received very good feedback about it. And it's a training platform that not only will capture data in the context of the stats around compliance and all of that kind of stuff in a single and coherent way, but it is also a platform that's much more user-friendly and accessible, and actually will allow us to put our own further training on it, so that people can access training in a much easier way. I think the intention obviously is to roll it out in phases, and the phases obviously would be around council staff and schools. I think also the intention, maybe in year 2 of it, is to also roll it out to allow our independent providers in the care sector, for instance, who have training to use it as well. So yeah, confident that will provide a good solution, but obviously just got to bear with us in terms of the implementation and rollout and phasing of that. I think just quickly to the point about face-to-face training, I agree with you, Councillor Paul, that you know, certainly I think some training can be done in and you know, that face-to-face training is potentially richer in some aspects, and certainly I've been in discussions, for instance, with Mike Jones, our new head of innovation and transformation, around whether, particularly in relation to IT, as you say, we could start to do more, use some of our internal staff. And in fact, you know, we've been recently rolling out across the authority Magic Notes, as you know, and the training on that has been being led through our IT team, and has proved to be very effective. So we are looking at that as well. But I think, just to flag, I guess, the reality of suddenly going back to all of our training being delivered face to face, I think is unlikely. And I think for two things. I think one, a lot of staff are actually welcoming engaging with training online rather than in face-to-face. And obviously, there would be no doubt that if we rolled out extensively more face-to-face training, that has a cost burden to it, which I'm not saying wouldn't be worth doing, but I think there would need to be an assessment of the business case behind that. Thank you.
Yeah, just to come back on that last point. Sorry.
Yeah, you're okay. Pop it back on. Yeah. I don't know what's going on with the microphones.
Just to come back on that last point, of course, I'm highlighting, as Callum did, those people who hadn't completed their mandatory training, whether they were officers or whether they were governors or councillors. And I think it would be quite appropriate to send a mandatory letter out to those people. You turn up on this day to do that training. And if I was a governor or a councillor or an officer, I'd get the message then. And okay, that will be an extra cost, I accept, Amanda, but it would solve our problem. And so I think we've got to be creative on this, and I'd ask you to look at that. Right, the second point...
Councillor Paul, just 1 second. Callum, was that something you wanted to come in on that particular point, or is it something later?
There was a point I wanted to come in, and I wanted to ask a question as well.
Cover that quickly and then...
Thank you very much. It was something that Councillor Gareth said, and obviously you were right to talk about the idea of corporate risk. And you said that, the idea of defending ourselves, what happens. I did want to make a point about, I think this will be the same for every local authority in the country, to be fair, the idea of corporate risk, the idea of saying what happens if, something goes wrong, what happens to the reputation, what happens to defending ourselves. I just wanted to highlight the idea of there needs to be a proactive approach rather than reactive, because it does feel like through corporate risk that I've seen for Denbighshire and Gwynedd as well, it's very much reputation is the highest priority of risk, rather than actually, if you do the job properly, there won't be any need to have that risk. So I just wanted to make that point. Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you, Callum. Yes, in terms of safeguarding and reputational, we all look sideways to Gwynedd at recent events, don't we? And that concerned us greatly. And I don't know if you were here for the session we did on that, but it was very, very helpful here in Conway. So thank you. I'll bring in the leader, then Councillor Paul with your second question. Councillor Julie.
Thank you, Chair. Just really quickly to say, just in terms of face-to-face, that we have the advanced safeguarding training that takes place, which is open actually to members of social service staff, education. I attended in my role as Cabinet Member for Education at that point. The leader attended, Councillor Charlie at the time, and there were head teachers, there were SENCOs, there were numerous people who are the people who, really need the opportunity to have that advanced safeguarding, and it was incredibly well attended, and that's something that they're hoping to do annually. So there is opportunity for face-to-face, but I appreciate what Amanda said there in terms of if we were to start to roll that out with all the different mandatory training, it might be difficult and certainly costly. But in terms of the more advanced training for safeguarding, I found it incredibly informative, and everybody I spoke to, whether it was social workers or head teachers or relevant members of staff, they equally found it incredibly helpful. So just wanted to highlight that point. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Julie. Paul, your second question, then we're going to move to the recommendations because we're way over time on this one. Councillor Paul.
Well, Yolo and Katie won't be surprised that I'm going to ask a further question on housing. Lack of supply of housing in my area is the biggest issue on my agenda and the thing I get most phone calls about. And my concern is how we report on this. Now, I understand we are now working towards a publicly accessible dashboard on this, and I think that would be a real positive. But I think the full reality of the waiting times that people wait on the housing waiting list remain very significant. Now, I know Katie will say we will get a good supply of social housing in the next year, and I agree there has been a significant increase in that. And I'm also conscious, obviously, that if you're on the housing waiting list, it does depend what priority band you're in. But the harsh reality, if you're waiting for a 3-bedroom property, you're likely to wait between 2 and 5 years. And there are still people on the waiting list who've waited longer than 5 years. And if you want a 1-bedroom property, you're pretty likely to wait 5 years. And I think it's that harsh reality that we need to report and record in our reports. I'm sure Katie and Yola are going to come back to me on this.
Yes. Katie, she's ready for you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, so obviously the data here, this is the self-assessment for the whole council. It is very high level, the records that we have here. I hope you'll acknowledge that things are moving in the right direction across the housing supply and the temporary accommodation, and also note that need and demand continues to grow. We do have the housing strategy. There are 5 delivery plans under there that will come through to a committee annually, so there is a chance there for a bit more of a deep dive. I know, Councillor Paul, you've been very keen as well on more that we have on the website, which we are working on. We know that will really help people be able to access information themselves. My warning on that is some of this is quite complex, and I would warn against general timeframes. The register is very complex. People can choose a number of areas depending on where you want, the type of property you want. There is such a disparity. So it's very hard to give those figures you've given because of the complexity of trying to do that. So we do here have just a number of applicants, which I know is probably not telling the whole story, and we can try and dig down, but I think there's other indicators that will help show the progress that's being made, because it is just too difficult to give those general timescales, and it is a bit misleading, because obviously the messages we constantly give to people is if they have a broader range of options, if they're more flexible on some of those options, accommodation will become available sooner. And some people, through no fault of their own, have requirements that are more complex.
Thanks, Katie.
You happy, Councillor Paul? It is what it is. We aim to please. Okay, members, could I have, you've seen the recommendations, and I know we've got most of the cabinet here and they have listened intently to our debate this morning, and they know where we're coming from with a lot of these items here this morning. So please could I have a proposer and a seconder for the recommendations? Councillor Nia? Councillor Chris? Okay, if we could open the vote, please. If everyone that's eligible would like to vote. Let's have a look. Have we all voted? Oh, quite a few not pressed yet. Let's have a look. Should be 11 of you. Okay. Okay, let's close the vote, please. Thank you. That vote is carried. Thank you, members. No one against. No one against that. So.
Chair, I did vote. I don't know why it's not recorded.
We'll look into that. Yeah, there's glitches everywhere this morning, Cromwell, including with the air conditioning and the system for showing who's speaking. So it's Monday morning. Let's carry on. Okay, we now move to the next item, which is the panel performance assessment report and draft response, pages 188 to 236. Councillor Julie, the leader, is going to introduce the report, and Reenac Gareth, our chief exec, is going to present the report. So, Councillor Julie.
Diolch, Cadeirydd. Thank you, Chair. So as the Chair's just said, this report presents the panel performance assessment report and draft management response following the assessment that took place last December. So for those that don't know, which I'm sure most of you do, but the Local Government Elections Act from 2021 requires that principal councils must make arrangements so that at least once during the period between two consecutive ordinary elections, a panel be appointed by the council to assess the extent to which the council is meeting the performance requirements. So as I said, this was back in December. And for me, it was actually it was good in terms of timing. Obviously, I was appointed leader back in October, and it gave me the opportunity to really assess where I felt we were, where I would like us to be, and to hear the feedback from others. So I think today, you having the opportunity to look at the report and to look at the management response, I'm hoping you can feed into that and into the suggestions in the action plan, if you like. And I think that's incredibly important. As I said, we've had discussions, a number of discussions around this. But today, I'm going to hand over to Yolos shortly so that he can go through the report. But this is for all of us, really. It's an opportunity for staff. It's an opportunity for us as members to really pause, take a look at what's happening, and it's an opportunity for change. I will hand over to Yola to go through, but then perhaps, Chair, if you don't mind, I can come in when Yola's finished and touch on some of the points, certainly that I've actioned and that we as Cabinet have actioned, and see if you want to feed in, certainly around communication, obviously, which I've made one of my key priorities. But I welcome members' input today. So I'll hand over to Yola to go through the...
Thanks.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks.
Sorry, I didn't see.
It's Reen.
Oh, sorry, Reen.
Reen's
Oh, it says you're on the
going
report.
to present, but no, we welcome you coming
Okay.
back in after. So I have to switch this off now so you don't come up as me.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. I do not have the hair.
No, you don't.
Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Thank you very much, everybody. I will do the first bit in Welsh. So if you want to put your headsets on. Just to add to the leader's words, this was quite, difficult piece of work before Christmas. And I have to say, on one hand, it was challenging, but on the other hand, it was a huge advantage for us, definitely as officers. And I know the leader believes it was a huge help for the Cabinet and wider members, because there was quite a lot of discussion, and the leader and myself, every day we were reporting back and getting feedback, and it was very helpful. And I think we're very lucky in Conwy that we had a very experienced panel, and we had a chair that was very experienced, that gave us a little bit of a different side, because she came from Scotland and looking at things maybe a little bit different. And I think that's definitely something that I've fed back to WLJ. It is beneficial to have eyes from outside of Wales in this process, and I know other members have had that benefit as well and found it beneficial. So I will turn back to English now.
Just to run through the report. So, as the leader says, section 3 of the report, you will note, sets out the legislative requirements in terms of the Local Government and Elections Act. And this was the first PPA round of PPAs in Wales, and each of them will be completed before May 27. I think everyone now actually has completed theirs in Wales. So Cabinet approved the appointment of the panellists in October 25, and the assessment took place on site between the 2nd and the 5th of December, and it was a mix of document reviews, hybrid or remote, hybrid or on-site working, comprising one-to-one interviews and focus groups. So following the panel performance assessment, a panel must make a report setting out the conclusions as to the extent to which the council is meeting the performance requirements, and any actions the panels recommend that the council take in order to increase the extent to which it meets the performance requirements. And the final report is annexed in Appendix 1. Draft report management response is also included in Appendix 2 and has been developed with the collective input of SLT, SMT and Cabinet. And as soon as reasonably practical after finalising the report, it must be published at least 4 months before the next ordinary election of councillors to the council and shared with Audit Wales, Estyn, Care Inspectorate Wales and Welsh ministers. And Welsh ministers have commented, or certainly civil servants have commented as to there are some consistent themes coming out across Wales which are very, very similar to the themes that are coming through in our report. Mirroring a lot of what's been said, which actually is very good from a national level, that we can then maybe have some collegiate thinking about a way forward on some of this. But yeah, just for your information. So I'll turn to the actual report, and I won't go through it in any detail because it's there for you to read. It's a lengthy document. I'd like to highlight part 8, which is on page 201, where you'll note the panel recorded key areas of strengths across the council, including an ambitious council. Conwy is ambitious for the communities it serves and is committed to delivering the best possible public services. Collective ownership. The panel observed a strong culture of collective ownership and dedicated workforce with a desire to deliver quality services underpinned by relentless focus on continuous improvement. Partnership working. Conwy Council is recognised as a respected and valued partner, and collaborative working is underpinned by a strong and well-established foundation. And is a self-aware council. Conwy Council knows itself and its communities well. The panel, in all of its engagements, found a collective political and officer leadership to be honest, open and receptive to challenge and potential for improvement, which I think came across incredibly strongly in the feedback that we had, that our openness as a council, our openness as elected members and officers is something that they really valued, because for us to get anything out of this process, you need to be open and receptive to change. So it came over really, really strongly. And then 8.2 mentioned some specific areas of good practice. The executive summary then, I think the 9.0 sort of reflects a lot of what we discussed during that week. Conwy Council cares deeply about the communities it serves and is ambitious for the County of Conwy. The Council is committed to delivering public services that are valued and improve the lives of people who live, work and visit the county. The Council is self-aware and recognises that there is a requirement and presently an opportunity to change, to reset priorities, to work at pace and collectively across the council, and to deliver transformation to secure financially sustainable council services to the future. The panel encouraged the council to embrace the urgency of now. So overall, and I think this is the important thing in terms of the statutory requirements, the panel concluded that the council is exercising its functions against the performance duties contained within the Local Government Elections Act 2021. So in terms of the standards, it's incredibly important that that is met, and the panel found that it was. I'd refer you to 9.5, where the panel heard from a dedicated and committed Team Conwy workforce. Panel members met with staff who love working for the council. And I think the chair said in her feedback session to us that she'd never, ever used that word in a report before. And that is really, really a positive that we should take of that in terms of our workforce. So in terms of the draft management response, the introduction, I think, says it all there for you. And the second paragraph, the panel report provides a thoughtful and balanced assessment of the council's current position, recognising areas of strength alongside clear and well-evidenced opportunities for improvement. We particularly welcome the spirit in which the recommendations have been made as part of a sector-led improvement and their focus on helping council respond effectively to the financial and organisational and leadership challenges we face. The document sets out the formal response to each of the panel's recommendations together with some of the actions we intend to take to address them. I would make the point that this is a high-level action plan, so the detail obviously will follow in terms of some of these actions. Some of this, and I'm sure the leader will go into detail on some of them, are in train already. Some of them will take a little bit longer because of the nature of what they are. But this is a document that's taken a lot of thought and time to put into place, and I'd like to thank all the team who've been involved in putting this together, and really would welcome, as the leader said, your input into this. It would be very valuable. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Diolch. Really. Councillor Julie, do you want to come back in before we start?
Yeah, I'll just come in on a few points around what we've done. So obviously when I was elected leader back in October, made communication one of my key points, key aims, ambitions, whatever term you want to use. So I just wanted to touch on some of the stuff which feeds into the actions that you see as part of this, that certainly I've introduced along with the cabinet and with staff as well. So I had my first roadshow, which I've mentioned to members. I think that's a really good opportunity to communicate where I'll be going around the county. Had the first one here in the central area. Was attended probably by about 60 people, I would say, roughly.
60-ish,
and it was great. It was an opportunity for members of the community to raise concerns and equally highlight where things are going well, they felt. And then afterwards, there was opportunity for them to talk to me directly if they didn't want to, or to Rhyn, and there were some other members there around things. And I will continue that throughout the county. The next one is coming up this month over in Llanfyfechan, which is for the West. So I think that's a good start. And again, it's about being visible, which was one of the points that came through really strongly around the PPA. We've got joint cabinet, it mentions in here, joint cabinet and SMT. We've got our next one tomorrow. Again, that's an opportunity to kind of brainstorm and think about how we might do things, and that closer collaboration between SMT and members. And I appreciate that's cabinet. Maybe there's opportunity to expand that wider going forward. I'd appreciate feedback from members to see whether we do something with SMT and members more generally. I'm meeting with heads of service, so I'm asking them where in the community they want that to take place, and I'm going out meeting staff, trying again to address some of the points that were raised through the PPA, that some staff felt there was maybe a sort of separate part in terms of the political running of the council and staff who are out working on the front line. I've gone out with Katie, had a look at some provision that we have. I've gone out with ERF, which was really interesting, went around the county, looked at some of the projects, met staff who were out on the road, met some of our partners who were doing some of that work. So really positive. Obviously, you've probably seen my videos, which I'm trying to increase, and the feedback isn't always positive, but that's just the way it goes, isn't it? Questions at cabinet's going to be introduced soon, so that will be open to any member of the public. There'll be two slots for people to ask a question. It will be in the same way that we'll get it in advance, the same way we do where there's cabinet questions, members to cabinet in scrutiny. So, but it can be anything really. And I think, again, that's just opportunity to just try and build those bridges and for people to feel a part of what we're doing here at Conway. Obviously, Chair, you know that I meet with group leaders. I meet the leader of the opposition monthly where we can, and to also say that I met with the First Minister last Thursday along with some other cabinet members up at the Family Centre in Llanrwst, which was really positive. But I've invited him to come and meet with the cabinet so that we can have a discussion around priorities for Conway and opportunities that might be there. So that's just a touch of some of the stuff that's happening. I could probably sit here for the next couple of hours and continue, but I just want members to realise that, you know, we haven't just said, oh, that would be nice, but actually we're getting out there and trying to engage as much as possible. But again, welcome feedback from members as to other opportunities we could take and how we just try to share that story of hope of Conway, because it is, and that's what I want people out there to realise. We have amazing staff, we all know that. It's just how we get that message out there. So I'm working on it. And obviously, in terms of resilience, I don't know if anyone wants to come in, or perhaps Chris wants to come in around the finances, but I have, I'll speak to Sian about it again, just to follow up, but to organise the informal meeting around the resilience board and the strategy, so that we as members can have an informal discussion around that and where we're up to and what opportunities there might be through there. But it's exciting. I feel as though that's really started to progress. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Julie, and I really welcome you've now restored the group leaders meetings, as you said, which have been hugely valuable for us all, and you've also set up a meeting with myself as the leader of the largest group on the opposition, which hadn't been done before, and I welcome the much more collaborative approach of this cabinet as to the previous one, a much more productive relationship all round. And I thought that the public engagement session was very good as well. It was well attended, and you didn't get too much hassle. So yeah, that's great. Who is what have we got coming next? Who's going to, anyone? Gareth, you, Councillor Gareth, right?
Right. Yeah. Really interesting and comprehensive report, and I would say there's not a lot in it that we didn't actually know already or suspect. And I really like the key phrase in it is that urgency of now. You know, it's a shame it wasn't the urgency of 4 years ago, because a lot of what we've been talking about, as I said, is what we've actually seen and known about. You know, it talks about that resilience strategy that actually needs to be accelerated, and we need to be actually having costed transformation projects, and that resilience strategy has to coincide and align with our medium-term financial strategy and the people strategies. It's part of that joined up thinking, which is, in a big organisation, is really quite difficult sometimes to get all these projects aligned. But we need that urgency, and they're clearly saying that we need to accelerate it and get a move on. It talks about the abundance of procedures, guidance, templates and frameworks, which is an abundance of red tape. But we need that focus on the outcomes. You know, it's the results that are important, what happens. And there's that, you know, there's so much procedures and outcome and guidances and things like that, that sometimes it can actually stifle staff innovation by the sound of it. And probably the third really key thing for me was that need to focus on communities. You know, we need to have engagement and good partnerships with the town councils and community councils and work together. And I would go further and say, well, actually, we need closer relationships with our fellow county councils, where we're looking at sharing services and maybe sharing executives and things like that, so we can actually make the most and work together. Because the reality is we're all fairly small councils in North Wales, and we need to get those economies of scale to actually, you know, that urgency of now. We've got to face the reality of that demand is increasing and funding certainly isn't keeping pace with it. And is unlikely to keep pace with it. So I would guess that's why they're saying it's the urgency of now. We really got to get to grasp with it and move at pace. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Councillor Gareth. Councillor Julie wants to come back there, and then we go to the other speakers.
Yeah, just...
Ooh.
There we go. Just quickly to say, yeah, completely agree with Gareth. It's taken the opportunities in terms of partnerships. So I've gone along and met with all the clerks from the town and community councils in that vein to see how can we work together. And they asked and we had a discussion around the possibility of a medium-term plan for town and community councils. I've brought that back. We've discussed that at informal cabinet, and that's a work in progress now that different departments are looking at. What could they do? And I've asked town and community councils to look at, you know, what they feel that they would like to contribute to in communities. They were talking about maybe the possibility of some of them working together in order to address some of these things, maybe setting up some kind of charity or something along those lines to address some local issues going forward, or the management of certain things, whether that's toilets, etc. I mean, I'm just putting that out there. Obviously, they were just suggestions, but yeah, completely agree. Community, it's incredibly important. Obviously, town and community council is a big part of that. I appreciate we have the forum already, but this is just building on top of that. What can we do? And yeah, I think that's absolutely a priority. And I'll continue to push and meet with them regularly. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Julie. Next, we've got Callum.
Diolch, Chair. I just wanted to hone in on really quite, it directs, it's the stakeholder survey from the previous report, but the results in that are actually quite supportive and really showcase actually the hard work of all members, leader, cabinet, officers, councillors, that actually the work you're doing is pulling through, but there's a big gap. So the stakeholder survey says 53% of participants in Conway say actually the council treats its workforce well. Now that's the only green factor out of any of the other ones. All the other ones are really shocking. Nothing to do with the local authority. That's the picture across the country. Local authorities always get slammed for what they do, but that's the one green thing that actually I think sticks out. And it sticks out like a sore thumb on this report, and I assume it would stick out across all local authorities. I think Conway does an excellent job in showing it treats its workforce well to the members of the public. But so the question is really, and this is what we're all discussing now, is if members of the public are saying, actually, yeah, the council treats its workforce well, people who work for the council are treated well, they're able to thrive in their job, then why are all other aspects of the stakeholder survey quite damning? Because to my understanding, obviously local authorities get battered in the press, but people are saying, hang on, the workforce is really, really good, they're really well supported. So is there any plan moving forward to kind of utilise that figure and maybe use it as a vehicle to show to people, look, we support our staff now, and showcasing that there's a way to actually bring all these other figures up? Because obviously, you'll never get it perfect. You might not even get it over 50%, but there's a really good opportunity here, and it's a testament to the hard work of the staff, both on officers and councillors. But I just wanted to hone in on that because it links to this and it showcases what you do works, and it's very, very strong. I think it's one of the best in local authority in Wales, but how do you use that to reciprocate it into all the other areas? So thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Callum. I think the Chief Exec's going to come back in on that one.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And actually, as you say, it comes over that. And I think the first things that came through in the staff survey, again, that will come through at some point, but there's some positives there as well from the staff themselves. And the stakeholder survey, of course, there's a cohort of staff who've actually filled that form in as well. So, there's an element there that comes through from our own staff. So that's really positive. I guess from the points you're making around how do we change that perception, I think it comes down to what the leader was saying, really, around how we engage, how we get out there, how we listen. I think that's, and the stakeholder survey is part of that we listen to people's concerns, because ultimately, I think if you ask members of the public out there, their interactions with staff is virtually always positive. It's the outcomes is the other part of the equation, isn't it? And that has a lot of influence from our resilience, our funding. There's a lot in there that brings that perception out. So you're right. It's about trying to move the dial slightly around, well, actually, we are doing very well in a lot of areas. Especially when you consider the limited resources we have and the shrinking resources we've had over the past 15 years, millions and millions have been taken out of the budget. So I think getting that message across, but I think the leader is spot on. It's about getting out there, hearing what people have to say, and what can we do to make people's lives better within the resources we have. And I think if I share the leader's view around the roadshow. I think it was very much a conversation, a listening conversation, and there were things there that actually came out that were for us really quite okay. we can definitely work on some of that. We can get some things done within the resources we've got. And you know, I think that listening part of it is, you know, you're never going to change the dial without listening to people, because that's really, really important. So that's a really good point, and I'll take it on board. Thank you.
Thank you very much both for that. So we've got online councillors Abdul, and then Kathy, and then Councillor Paul in the chamber. Councillor Abdul, good morning.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I just want to highlight something on report on page 202, 9.10, where the panel considered that within the council's approach, there is not enough focus on communities and the role that they play in the helping to deliver for Cornwall. And it goes on, but I won't read the full report. So I wonder if the roadshow came out of this report, because, and I must thank Leader and the Chief Executive for coming to having the first roadshow in Column Bay, because I didn't deliberately attend, Chair, because I thought it's it's an opportunity for public to have their say. But when they saw the dates and advert on, there's been quite widely advertised as well, and obviously they come to, I'm sure you had people come to you to say, is it worth going? I said, well, that's your opportunity to say, you know, what you really want. But they said, yeah, we have said that in past, but it doesn't hurt, you know, doesn't get listened to. And it's true, isn't it? As a local member, we report, because that's what we are, the voice of the community, and we do express their voices. And more often than not, it's not heard, because not that people don't want to be heard, but we just don't have the means. Where there's a will, there's a way. But we seems to be doing expected to do more for less, and that's the bottom line. So there's already outstanding issues that need resolving, need addressing, and we say no, we haven't got it. And it's some of them are quite big, some are little. The little ones is like replacing the bins or putting bins where it needed. Now there's a lot of hedges growing on the path, and it's cutting, but we haven't got the money. Big project like Station Road, the leaders who are invited along with to the Station Road businesses, I think she has been or hasn't been, but they express the desire for it to be open. And how long have we been involved in that? What's happening? So are we creating more jobs for ourselves by asking people and lifting them, you know, wishes, saying, yes, finally we can get our things done by going direct to the roadshow? Are we giving the false expectation? Because we can't deliver the ones that's outstanding. That's my question to the leader. Thank you.
Dear Councillor Abdul. Leader?
There we go. Lovely. Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Councillor Abdul. Yeah, it was an idea I had in my head for some time, really, around engagement and opportunities to get out there. And I think the PPA just allowed us to hone in on what that might look like, how we shape that to make sure that it works across the whole county and that people feel that they have the opportunity to be included in what we're doing, Abdul. You mentioned Station Road. That was mentioned a number of times at the roadshow. And as a result of that, Councillor Mike and I are going to go along to the next board to discuss. And I think part of it is, I appreciate it's not necessarily that we'll have additional money that we can spend on these things, but they said that will help for businesses to realise that we're supportive of the project, and having the leader and deputy leader of the council there, shows that we're supportive and we want to help in whatever way we can. And my hope is that that's what the roadshow will do. You've got the chief executive of the council, leader of the council, and there are a number of cabinet members that were there as well, and local members, just so that people can see that we care about the community and we want to hear. We've called it Here to Listen, and that really feels as though that's what it's about. So it might not be that we can answer everything, and I was very honest and said that at the meeting, but it's being there to listen, to see what can we do. And sometimes it might be signposting to funding pots that are already in existence, or that people that can help around that, whether that's CVSC or maybe some departments within the council. But yeah, really it's just about building that relationship back up with our communities. And hopefully this becomes an annual thing, whether it's me as leader next year or whoever it might be, that there is the opportunity, so that if there is something that's coming up within a certain area, or something that's more regional or national even, that they know, oh, okay, well, there'll be a roadshow coming up at some point, and they can either go to their local one, or obviously people can attend any of them, that there's opportunity to come along and raise any question that you want to. So that's really what it's about, Abdul. It's an opportunity, and I would hope that you would encourage people to go along and just have the chance to put forward their concerns, or even comment when they've experienced something positive. And there was obviously really good feedback around the prom here down in Colwyn Bay. So it just feels good. It feels right to be out there, even if it is a case of facing the music to a certain extent, because we're not going to always get everything right. But I think people feel better when they've had the chance to share where they are and the experience that they've had with us council. And as Fiona said, there were some really positive points that we've now got in a list that we can work on some of those, and they're things maybe that we're doing. And it was also a case of signposting and highlighting people had mentioned maybe some hotspots around ASB or other things. We had the police there as well, so they were able to link in and share what they're doing. So yeah, it's positive, and hopefully it will build and become something that's the norm. So thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much, Leader. Well, I had some feedback because members of the public attended several years ago now the consultation we had about opening up Station Road and the active travel within Colwyn Bay, and they said what's happened. We all turned up and we all gave our opinions, and that's what we wanted, and it's been deafening silence since then. So the feedback that you actually listened and said you'd be looking at it went down really well. So thank you for that. Next we move on to Councillor Cathy online, then Councillor Anne. Councillor Cathy.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully I've got my microphone on. Just a couple of things, picking up on the importance of community that a lot of people have mentioned, particularly most recently Councillor Abdul, and about partnership working with town and community councils. The revised framework for local area forums did allow for attendance by town clerks. This is once for the local area forum West, and I wondered if that could be revisited and perhaps formalised in terms of community working in partnership on the ground. I also wanted to make a point about looking forward to Councillor Julie meeting with our local town clerk in Pemamau, who has been recently appointed. I understand that hasn't yet been scheduled, so that would be great if that could be. I'm also really glad to know that there will be a roadshow event for the West. If local members are also supporting the roadshows, who will be invited to the Plan for Fechan event, and will the lists of issues that arise from these be shared with local members to work on as a team? Thank you.
The old Councillor Cathy. Leader.
There we go. Thank you. In terms of the workings of the local area forum specifically, that's not down for me to manage. Obviously, that's belongs elsewhere. In terms of the town and community councils, well, I'll be meeting with the clerks again of the town and community councils. So if the clerk in Penmaenmawr has been newly appointed, then hopefully they'll come along to the next one of those, and I'll have opportunity to meet with her in person. In terms of inviting local members, that's, you know, if they want to come along, obviously the west area includes my area, Deganwy, Llandudno Junction, Conwy. It includes Penmaenmawr, Llanfairfechan. I've decided to go to the very west because people would typically think it would be at Llandudno Junction or Conwy, and actually I wanted it to be somewhere that's not necessarily typical. Local members would be invited, but I just want to make it clear in terms of local members, obviously your opportunity to have discussions with me is at council. This is about giving the community the opportunity to speak. So it's not that myself and Rhyn see it as an opportunity to take questions, field questions from county councillors. This is about the community, and obviously if it's a town or community council, that's fine. They're also invited along, and they don't have the opportunity to scrutinise in the way that we do as county councillors. But yeah, it's obviously an opportunity for the community to come and engage and feel listened to. I wouldn't want them to think that we were having some kind of political debate there. It really is for them to come and raise something that's local to them, that's relevant to them, that they don't have opportunity to raise. Thanks, Chair.
You content, Councillor Cathy, and I'll move on then to Councillor Anne. Councillor Anne?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And thanks.
Sorry,
Julie, for that.
sorry. Due to the microphone failures here, everything's jumping around. Councillor Cathy just wanted to come back in there. Councillor Cathy, then Councillor Anne. Thank you.
Deal. Yes. Just to come back, I didn't mean that county councillors should come along to ask questions. I may have misheard, but I thought that in Colwyn Bay, there were some other councillors invited along kind of to support or, not to be there asking questions. Absolutely, it's for the community. So maybe I misunderstood. Okay, just to clear that up. It wasn't me asking to come along and ask questions. Thanks.
Oh, thanks for that, Councillor Cathy. I think we were all really, local members that turned up, we're all really interested to hear what the people had to say. And that's what we were all doing there. I found it invaluable. So, yeah, great. Thank you. Now, Councillor Anne, thank you for your patience there.
Okay, thanks, Chair. And thanks, Julie, as leader. As you know, I welcomed the advent of this panel assessment event, and I was really impressed with the announcement of who the members of the panel would be. And I think the report that they've delivered, I think we all would agree is incisive, and their 7 recommendations are quite compelling, and more so because they're actually evidence-based. I think, given that they only had 4 days with us, but I'm sure they spent lots of other time reading reports and stuff. In fact, I know they did. The evidence that shines through for the recommendations is there clear for all to see. I was interviewed by Fiona Lees, and she was really easy to talk to and very informed about how things are done. So there's real credibility, I think, and authority within this report. And it's really pleasing to see there for some of the words that are being expressed today by Julie and by Rhyn and are within the sort of the management response, that we see the opportunity to improve within this. And that doesn't take away from all the positives that have been introduced within the report. However, I would say I found the management response plan a bit perfunctory, if I'm being completely honest, because it looked like a bit of a tick box exercise. there wasn't any SMART goals there that actually quantified what was being done, so it was really clear what was going to be enacted, and also where the priorities lie. And I think there's a danger in having a 23-point action plan to 7 recommendations, high level that these are, because the actual recommendations are about immediacy and urgency of change. And transformational change, and that doesn't come through for me within the list of 23 actions. I think also it's asking us to really fundamentally review the way that we're operating, and that's across the council, how every single department is engaging with the public in a relationship way rather than a transactional sort of way. And the underlying principle is the urgency of now. So, I mean, what I really want to say is I would really like to see us putting some sort of priority and focus into this so that we're actually distilling down the urgent and important and addressing it within our action planning. There's an old management theory of the rule of 3. So, you know, start with three urgent and important priorities and then have a sort of rolling plan. I mean, we've talked excessively in all of our finance meetings that we're really concerned about the pace of transformational change, the identification of monies that could be saved by doing some brave things, and actually having those costed and actually planned out. And I just don't get a sense that that sort of level of prioritization and urgency of action and, you know, the urgency of now and incorporating, you know, the willing. There's been a lot said about communities, and I really welcome that. I think it's probably not just calling for feedback sessions and listening groups. I think it's also asking us to think about, can we move away from a top-down decision making? Can we look at being more bottom-up in how we work with our communities? And communities are not just town and community councils, important though they are. It's all of the loads of volunteers who do brilliant stuff on the ground, day in, day out, for nothing, just because they've got pride in place. And I think there's a lot of skill and expertise and willingness there that we need to embrace that could potentially help us better meet the demand that's increasing, and that's a whole different ballgame from just engaging with communities in terms of feedback sessions, although I do welcome them. I'm glad that Julie has instigated those, but I think we really need to deep dive on communities about how we actually do that in a way that's strategic across the council, and it's a way of unleashing productivity and obviously executive oversight into that people are doing the right jobs, and obviously allowing other people to do their jobs as well. Because I did pick up there's a bit of tension between how we're operating. It looks as though it's, I don't know if it's SLT and SMT or SMT and below, but I think there's a real piece of work to look at the culture of the organisation and the operating model, because being strategic is absolutely what we need to do to get the transformational change, the costed changes that we need, so that we are not going to find ourselves yet again facing 40.5 million of deficits or 20 million deficits with actually very little to defend ourselves. So I think this is a hugely encouraging process and report, and I'd really like us to embrace it, and perhaps maybe would recommend that maybe there could be an additional session with members so that we could have some really deep diving together, because I think that would be really helpful to create the urgency of now and actually prioritise what we do. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much for that, Councillor Anne. I think we've got Reen and Councillor Julie wanted to both answer, so.
There we go. Thank you. And thanks, Councillor Anne. All really good points there. Yeah, I agree. The rule of 3 is really important, isn't it? It gives you a chance to really focus and prioritise. So that's something perhaps tomorrow when we have the joint cabinet and SMT, I can bring forward and see what we can look to prioritise. and whether there's opportunity then to feed that back. Agree around communities and volunteers. So I've asked Fran around looking to measure who we already have, because as you say, we have amazing people who volunteer in all sorts of different ways, and whether we can look to see what do we have, can we build on that. I mean, I think that's a great opportunity. Myself and Mike met with CVSC to see whether they wanted to be part of that journey in some way. They did mention that, and it surprised me really, that post-COVID, there are less volunteers. For some reason, people are a little bit more reluctant to volunteer their time. But I've certainly seen over the years that whenever I do anything, people say, how can I help? What can I do? So it's about how we can focus that. You know, Mike's mentioned numerous times, we've got the groups that help in terms of looking after our parks. We have people who volunteer in our schools, reading with children. We have numerous things. So how can we build on that? And I know I've said, and I don't know how realistic it is, but we have so many people that retire here with amazing skills in all kinds of areas, whether there's opportunity to have some kind of volunteering scheme where maybe if you're an accountant or a former teacher or whatever it may be, that you might want to volunteer a day, a week or a month or whatever to it. I've certainly seen that in the NHS when I've worked there over the years. We've got previous head of nursing from England who's a Robin in one of our hospitals. So people, you know, like to still continue to do something, don't they? So I think there's definitely opportunity there to build on that. I know that Fran and the HR team are doing a skills audit to look at what skills do our staff have that maybe aren't what they were hired for, but there might be opportunity for them to put themselves forward to do something different, whether that's on a part-time basis if there's a significant demand in one area, or whether it's something that we could look at going forward. I guess once we've got that info, we can look at it again. And in terms of an additional session for members, I think that's a really good idea, Anne. Let's brainstorm, let's blue sky think, let's do those things. You know, things have changed significantly in terms of the finances, and that's really what I get from the PPA. It gives us the chance to look at, and I've said that to departments when we met with Cabinet and SMT, I think it was the session before last, I asked them, you know, what's the one thing if you could have and change, you know, and there was some positive feedback from that. But I think we've got Mike Jones now, the new head of transformation and innovation. He's working with each department to look at ways of maybe doing things differently. And I've met with him and we've had discussions around, you know, if it was that a department could start from scratch, where would they start? What would they do? How would they build that? And then we need to look to be brave. Unfortunately, a lot of the time when you want to make change, and I know, Paul, you touched on it before, it's expensive to make change, especially when you're looking at, as Gromi was saying before, about schools. You know, if you want to change the footprint that we have of schools, then it's costly because you then have to provide something alternative. But yeah, all of these things, I think we have to have a discussion, and I'm very happy to meet and have an open, honest discussion around what other opportunities might be there. So happy if someone did want to propose that, Chair. Thank you.
Did you want to come in there?
Yeah, just very quickly. Thank you, Councillor Ann. I guess on the action plan itself, you know, there's a requirement that we have to cover the recommendations off within that management response. So the dates there will convey some of the things that we've put in trail already. So some of them you'll see, Julie's just mentioned the appointing Mike to the post, which is fundamental to a lot of not to put too much pressure on Mike, but it's pretty fundamental in terms of the way that role was reimagined in order to try and work with services for exactly the points that you're making around resilience and transformation. So I think for me, yeah, we'll take on board, but the detail will come through within all of those to you in different ways. You'll see within the action plan how they align with other plans, strategies, be those service plans, be those performance reports that come through, the SPRs, etc. So they will form part of that. But I take the point, yes, absolutely. And as Julie said, we can have a conversation around the rule of three, which I think is a very, very good rule. Personally, I think it focuses the mind. So absolutely, and grateful for that feedback. In terms of partnerships, I guess the only point I would make is, yes, absolutely, we probably need to reset some of those relationships, and I think the work that Julie mentioned with the town and community councils and with other partners is incredibly important there. What we shouldn't do is tell those partners what we want to do. We should listen to them first and then come up with that plan. And I think that's the purpose of the engagement that we're having at the moment. That will inform what processes we follow after that. I do also think that we shouldn't shy away from the excellent reports within the PPA around some of the relationships we already have. You know, we've worked really hard on some of those relationships, and, you know, the RSLs are pointed out specifically within the report, but that's taken a lot of time and effort and meetings in order to get ourselves to that place where I think we've got a really good working relationships with the RSLs at a very senior strategic level. And that certainly came through with the interviews they had with the PPA. So I think there are some blueprints for us there as well that we can use in terms of our partnership arrangements, which I think will be incredibly valuable for us moving forward. But yeah, really grateful for the feedback, Anne. Thank you.
Can I just come back, Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, I can. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Thanks for that, both Rena and Julie. And I'm really pleased that you find the input helpful. I think the other just comment I'd probably like to make is communities used to be something that was part of this council's DNA. And in fact, we actually had in my early days as a councillor, we actually had a service that was called the Community Development Service. And sometimes simple things like introducing that word that actually puts the focus on why we're here and what we're doing is really important. And also, I think it's very much about us saying to our communities across the whole council, what can we do for you rather than what can you do for us? Because that is what I heard Wigan Council do, and that stopped them making big increases in council tax because the community stepped up. And I think that's what Wendy Lees did in Ayrshire East, I think it was, because again, it's about the community stepping up and working with the bigger council. So great opportunities there. And I propose that we actually have a member meeting around the plan and sort of brainstorming, as Julie's agreed. I think that would be really useful, and I think it would help. Part of the other feedback that hasn't been mentioned about potentially streamlining scrutiny and actually helping how we work with more members so that we are making sure that we, perhaps off scrutiny meetings, we're able to have input and obviously be listened to as well as hear what's going on. So just thought I'd finalise with that. So I make the proposal about meeting with members. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Anne. We'll add that to the recommendations. I'm sure you're pushing on an open door there. Yes, I was looking forward to welcoming Mike Jones to this committee, and I hope he'll be attending at our next one. And I'm currently celebrating the rule of 3-2, so for everybody out there. Now, next we've got Councillor Chris Cater and then Councillor Sean, and then we're going to move to the vote.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I'm glad that Councillor Anne mentioned scrutiny, efficiency and streamlining and everything, because that's what I was going to ask you, Chair. And I know we've discussed this quite a lot, and I think we think the same, actually. But the report does quite clearly say that they feel that the scrutiny function should be reviewed and that presently it's taking too much of members', and I'm reading here from the report, member and officers' time and resource, and the panel identified an abundance of procedures, guidance, templates, frameworks, all intended to help the administration, but actually they were concerned that this was stifling innovation and taking up valuable member and officer time, which could be better spent. So just wondering what your personal take on that is. I know we've had discussions, but I thought I'd just put you on the spot because it is there in the report, and I think the public will want us to respond to that viewpoint that they have set out clearly there, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Chris. Well, we've had the scrutiny review, haven't we? And we've changed our ways of working. I think probably one of the problems has come that we now have to fill out topic selection forms for everything, which is causing more of an administrative backlog. And I know our scrutiny officers are working incredibly hard, but I don't think we can dilute the scrutiny. This sort of committee is where all the backbenchers get to put forward the views of their communities and their thoughts. So I'd be really I wouldn't like to undo the work done by the scrutiny review or to diminish any of the input from members, but it's something we need to look at. We need to follow the recommendations there and have a discussion about it. Maybe we could make that part of our council discussion day, Councillor Julie. I'd really appreciate that. So thank you. Next we've got Councillor Sean and Councillor Paul. Councillor Sean.
Thanks very much. Sorry for my voice. I've lost it. I've done a lot of talking in the last week. And thanks for letting me come in. I just wanted to add, I wanted to pick up before when we were discussing the communication, and I welcome any kind of extra communication. To me, communication's always been one of our hardest issues. We don't get enough word out to enough of the community. It's always been my issue. I've tried my best. But I do think the authority always seem to be on a back foot when we do anything positive and it ends up as a negative. The filming was a perfect example of that. It actually ran really well, but it was an absolute nightmare for about 2 weeks. And had we been ahead of that and been more prepared just to put out one statement and explain exactly what, when and where things were happening, when we were allowed to. I know it was originally we couldn't put anything out, but it would have run so smoothly and all that negative issues around the town would have absolutely been so different. And I feel that's just one example, but we get it over and over again. And the time that the officers must spend going backwards and forwards to people in the community unnecessarily, if we just put a full statement describing and explaining exactly, and if they understand it, they're absolutely happy to go with it. I do find also with the volunteers, a lot of them, people come to me that want to volunteer, they don't know how to or where to go, or if they do litter picking, where do they leave things, could they do weeding, and they get to such an extent that they worry about it that they end up not volunteering at all. So we lose a lot of our volunteers just because they don't know how to access or who to speak to discuss it and what they can do. And the one thing I've had a week long of events in Conway, and the one thing that has come over to me time and time again in the last week is most people welcome the Wellbeing of the Future Generations Act and think it's an absolute wonderful thing. But time and time again, they worry that their well-being is not being looked after and it's going to be overlooked, and it is often overlooked. And that's come over so many times this week to me, and I do worry about it. We see all these reports and it's on everything. It's all Wellbeing Act is on all our lips. But the people that are in our communities now are worrying that they're getting ignored, and they will be even worse going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sean. And can I take this opportunity to congratulate you on the brilliant performances and events that you put on in Conway in your community. You did a cracking job, and everyone was really, really happy with that. It's very impressive to see. So well done. That's why you're croaking. Yeah. Reen, did you want to come back briefly on that? I'll switch off.
Yeah, thank you, Sian, and I take on board. I do think we have at times not been the best in terms of the way that we do communicate, and I think it goes down to what the leader was saying really around that change of emphasis. I also think at times in terms of that officer member relationship and communication, we could be sharper as officers, and it's something that I've raised recently actually with our managers to make sure that we have everyone on board, that everybody understand. I think, and we will be providing some more bespoke training to officers there, because, you know, I get it, they're incredibly busy, you know, and you know they want to get the job done, but as the voice of the communities, you need to know, you need to understand if something is happening within your community. You need to understand before anyone else, because the last thing you want is to know from somebody in your community about something that we're already doing. So it is definitely something that I have prioritised and will continue to bang the drum about, because I know from my previous role the biggest complaints I would get would be from local members not knowing about something substantial going on in their area, and I'll continue to bang that drum, Shannon, and I thank you. And again, the reports about last week were incredible, so diolch yn fawr.
Diolch, Reen. Yes, that's a bugbear at the moment. There's been quite a few things that local members haven't been informed about that we're dealing with outside of here. So next we've got Councillor Simon online. Thank you for your patience, Councillor Simon. Then Councillor Paul in the chamber. I haven't forgotten you. Have you pressed your push to speak, Simon? Oh, it's not. You're muted. No. Oh, okay. Do you want to have another try? We'll take Councillor Paul. No. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Paul.
Thanks, Chair. I'm only just getting used to not being a member of this committee.
You never know.
Let me start positively. I've noticed greater collaboration since October, and that's positive. And I will always collaborate and co-produce, I think's the word, where we can. But my role is very much like every councillor's role, is to speak up on behalf of the community and what you hear in the community. And I've always held public meetings. I hold public meetings. I hire the town hall or a centre and have public meetings. So I hear what people say, and people come forward to me all the time, even knock me door, which my family don't like. And the real issue here with this management response is, in my view, where's the action? Where's the transformational change? We all know that the reason we've been able to be financially resilient over the last 4 years is because we have significantly increased council tax each year. That's how we've paid for the problems. We haven't increased it enough, I've argued, because we should have invested more in building up our capacity and capability to do some of the big things which we needed to do. Now, of course, this year, we're not going to have a massive council tax increase. It's an election year. We've got a £46 million medium-term strategy gap. I suspect it may well be bigger than that when we look at it again. And I'm hoping that in the budget working groups, Chris, in conjunction with cabinet members, is going to bring forward these transformative action changes so that we can make some decisions which enable us to do things very differently. Because if we don't get that, we are in a dire position. I mean, this year we're going to be in a dire position because I just don't think we'll get a big council tax through. We might get inflation. There'll be a lot of people arguing, freeze the council tax. You know, that is the reality. When I spoke to the member of this team that came, one of the things that I highlighted it to him was this issue about co-production. And I was very clear, and I've expressed it in this chamber before, this sort of begging bowl culture which we have. And I find it sort of demeans and infantilizes local politicians, councillors. It's degrading having to compete against another very deprived area. so we have to bid for these pots of money, and they're controlled by a small group of officers, civil servants, clique of politicians, other vested interests. And that whole process, when you talk about volunteers and community groups and things, it burns them out, that competing for the resources. You listen to people in community groups and they say, I just can't face filling in another grant application or even finding the officers for the community group. And I've been through this in my own community. When I was out campaigning, the children in my community said they wanted a pump track. I didn't even know what a pump track was. I had to ask them. Anyway, we set to build a pump track. We've built a pump track. It's UK recognised. But the process through which you go is tortuous, difficult, challenging. We got the money, we did it. My colleague Andrew Wood was absolutely amazing on the practicalities of it. But we need to look at how we do things. And the big issues in my community have still not been addressed 4 years in. Pensarn Flats. Okay, we've done some enforcement work, but it's still massive. The west end of Abergele, the gateway, still not made any progress. We were the first place plan town council. A lot of our place plan objectives, many years on now, because we were the first, are still not been implemented. And when I was doing my visitor levy consultation with the community, and I was getting feedback from them, here's an aspect. Now, you won't like what I'm going to say now, but this is an aspect of how the council's seen. When they were talking to me, some of these people, and they said, what are you going to do? How are you going to vote on the visitor levy and stuff? They said to me, Paul, one of the things you're naive about, he said, the professional leadership of Conway Council, the senior officers, the vast majority of them don't even live in Conway. Now, I know you're not going to like that, Rin, but that is the feedback from the ground. And it's why I could have formed, when I was talking with people about visitor levy, I could have formed an East Conway separatist party.
We're going a bit off topic here.
No, but what I'm saying is, and I'm providing that feedback, which Julie will get when she goes to her meeting in the east of the council. Those issues are what are being raised. Now, I'm not saying all our senior officers should live in Conway. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that's an impression. People feel that in the east of the county, their concerns are not heard, are not addressed, are not engaged with.
Well, we've done 7 minutes now, so Reen's going to come in and have a quick answer there, and then we've got to move to the recommendations and then the next report. We still have another report, guys, so thank you, Paul.
I'm not going to be long, Chair. I'll just, on the actual substantive points in relation to the report, clearly the action plan, as I've mentioned in previous responses, there will be other plans that will come through that you will be able to scrutinise that will bring these forward. That's the place where you will see the detail. There is no opportunity within this process to give that much detail. I don't think would be thanked by the panel because they need to approve the action plan. So I think that's where you need to direct your ire when it comes as to whether you think that what's being done is right or not. On your final point, all I would say is I am completely dedicated to the County of Conwy. I've given my all to this role. So that's all I'm going to say about that. And I know that all of the senior members of staff that work with me daily are fully committed. The last 4 years have been incredibly difficult for all staff across the county. And the hours of commitment that staff put in at all levels in this county should be appreciated by everyone. I understand that people might not understand that, but in terms of how that is portrayed. But for me, the team, the senior team, the managers, the frontline staff, everyone, the dedication that they put in, wherever they live, is for the people of Conwy. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So,
Like to acknowledge my dedication and hours of commitment to influence change in this council. And what I'm told, which is absolutely right from my thing, it's not happening quick enough in my area of the council.
thank you, Councillor Paul. I know you're passionate about your area. Councillor Stephen, did you just want to come in?
Yeah, I just wanted to come in briefly. I promise
Quickly.
I won't take 7 minutes not to answer a question. But just briefly on Pensarn Flats, Councillor Paul mentioned that nothing was being done. There is currently a legal process going through, and that's all I can say on it.
Okay.
When it comes to housing, Councillor Paul was invited to the site visit at the new housing development in Pensarn, and he was also did a site visit at Water Street for the new development by Wales and West. So to just suggest that no new housing is being built within the Pensarn Abergele area is completely incorrect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stephen. Okay, now we've got Yolo, just housekeeping again. Could we put the leader's name on the report, please, on the comments section of this report going forward? Make sure we've got those. Thank you. Now, recommendations, we've got those in front of us, and Councillor Anne proposed a councillor's session on management response. So have we got a seconder for the recommendations with that added to it? Councillor Gromway has seconded. Okay, so could we open the vote now, please? Everybody, how are we doing there? Let's have a look. Yep, can we close the vote, please? There we are. And that was carried unanimously. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you who's contributed to that. We now move on to the final report, which is considering a report by the Strategic Director of Finance and Resources on the following matter: the external regulatory report, the building blocks, capital planning in councils in Wales, pages 237 to 303. And Councillor Chris Kate is going to introduce it, and Gareth Evans, our Head of Finance, is going to present the report. And I think we have Charles Rigby with us from the Audit Wales as well. So, Councillor Chris.
Brown good afternoon. Thank you, Chair. As you can see from the report, what elected members are tasked with doing this morning is to consider Conway's response to the Audit Wales National Report, and that is the building blocks, capital planning in councils in Wales. This identifies common areas where councils should strengthen arrangements to improve value for money from capital planning. And I'm sure that's something, Chair, we can all agree on. Anything which strengthens member oversight and value for money is to be welcomed. It is reassuring that Conway is referenced as showing good practice in the transparency and structure of its capital business case approach. So I'll hand over to Gareth to go through the key areas focused on and the action plan which has been drawn up. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Gareth.
Diolch, Chris. Diolch, Chair. So this report presents Audit Wales' national review of capital planning across Welsh councils and the council's proposed response to the findings. So Audit Wales carried out detailed fieldwork across 6 councils and used evidence from other authorities, including ourselves, in terms of providing documentation of our processes, to inform its conclusions, which are issued to all councils rather than us receiving a Conway-specific report. So for this report, we weren't part of the interview process, and as I say, we didn't receive anything council-specific. So the auditors looked at capital planning arrangements across the local government sector, identified several common challenges, including long-term funding uncertainty, which will surprise nobody, the need for stronger evaluation of investment outcomes, and the importance of robust asset information to support decision making. Overall, the report is positive from Conway's perspective. Audit Wales recognised aspects of the council's capital planning arrangements,
as examples of good practice, particularly our capital business case process through the business planning framework, and the links between investment proposals and corporate priorities. Therefore, our proposed action plan focuses on continuous improvement rather than addressing any specific weaknesses or issues at Conwy. I wasn't expecting anyone from Audit Wales here today, and the last time I saw Charles, he didn't look like that, even though it says his name. I think that's Carwyn online today. I don't think Carwyn was specifically involved in this, and I think the intention is as well that there be representation from Audit Wales at Governance and Audit Committee when the report goes there. But if there are any questions that members have in relation to this review, hopefully myself and Carwyn between us can answer those.
Thank you very much, Gareth. Yes, it's a morning for that, isn't it? I'm not going to comment about Carwyn's hair, so there we go. Well, welcome, Carwyn. Sorry about that. We had we weren't quite sure about that. Do you want to say something before we start, or do you want to respond to any members' questions if there are any directed at you? Press your push to speak button. Give that a try.
Am I on?
Yeah. Yes, you're on. Lovely.
Sorry. Still getting used to this technology. No, I think Gareth has introduced it well. I think where this piece of work has come from and the legislation it's responding to is to make recommendations for improvement. So some work looks specifically at local government. This looks at the system as a whole. So obviously it's got looks at how the money is flowing into local authorities as well, how they're managing it. But I think the council's action plan is responding to our first recommendation, looking at what within what's in the council's gift, what it can do to continue to work towards achieving value for money, given what's in its control. And separately, I think this report is then tabled at the Senate, or has been at some point will be tabled at the Senate, where they'll hold Welsh Government to account for their part in the equation.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed. Well, we've already got 3 members wanting to ask questions, and we'll start. Councillor Gromway, you're the first. Diolch.
Thank you. And this has always been a concern to me when we're looking at moving forward and reducing some of our ongoing costs and maintaining our infrastructure and finding efficiencies by improving that. Now, I've mentioned many times in this chamber the new policies that government have put on pension funds, and I've got to leave in a minute anyway because I've got a pension fund meeting, that there is up to 10% of local government pension pots available for development infrastructure. Now, I know the issues we have around the 21st century schools, and the times we put bids in to try and move things forward, we've failed with our bids to Welsh Government because whatever the rules they come up with, it doesn't fit their plans or their pods. And the same with the waste transfer site that we're looking at in the Bickwithing Junction. I think that if there's a proper case that can be made to improve our facilities and our services going forward, we need to look at the ability to access the pension funds. And I'm not sure if the gentleman from Wales Audit has any information about how other authorities are looking at that pot of funding, because certainly what's holding us back from much of our development, as I said, is the lack of funding that we can attract from Welsh Government. So I think we need to for some reason. Yeah. I've mentioned this, so I think, is there any work being done on looking, can we improve our infrastructure by accessing funding through that avenue?
Thank you, Councillor Gromway. Carwyn, had you got an answer to that about pension funds? Oh, press your push to speak again. Pesky thing.
Sorry. We haven't got any specific work at the minute around pension funds and their investments. I think we do annually each local government pension schemes and go a financial audit looking at the audit of accounts and the retrospective investments. But I think it's there for each pension fund to look at its investment opportunities and identify those within the legislation without doing the detailed work. I couldn't comment, but yeah, no, there's no current plans on the Auditor General's work programme to look at how pension funds are investing their money.
Diolch. Thank you. Councillor Gronwy, did you want to just come back?
Well, as I'm leaving in a minute to go and attend the pension board meeting, and whether members are aware, pooling of pension funds in Wales is underway. The actual pension fund in Gwynedd is worth £4 billion, and up to 20% of that will be over £400 million of funding that could be accessed if the case is made properly to improve infrastructure. I think we need to be aware of that and look at, are there any potentials in Conway or with our neighbouring authorities to improve the infrastructure that we all know is ageing within our authorities, and we're finding, as I said, difficulty to access funding through Welsh Government.
Lovely, thank you. Amanda, you just wanted to come in there.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Gronwy. I know Councillor Gronwy's raised this point before, as he says, and I've made inquiries through the Gwynedd Pension Fund in relation to that. So as Councillor Gronwy's just articulated, essentially, across Wales there is a Wales Pension Partnership that is been set up, and they are. It's my understanding that they are potentially looking at arranging and setting up vehicles that could potentially be look at potential investments and essentially potential for infrastructure assets, but essentially funds which they're looking at, I guess, what would be impact projects. And I guess the key point is, and I mean, clearly, obviously, Conwy, as with other local authorities, need to be astute and pay attention if they have the kind of projects that would potentially meet those requirements. But I think what we have to always remember is that the pension fund will be interested on returns on their investment. Essentially, they have a fiduciary duty to ensure that the funds are managed to pay the future pensions effectively. So in any process, there would be an incredibly rigorous assessment around how the returns to the pension fund would be achieved, but clearly they're looking for, no doubt they will be looking for attractive projects to invest in. I did at the time, this was in autumn last year, go back to my counterpart in Gwynedd to ask about whether the Welsh Pension Partnership has given guidance out around what they would consider to be an attractive project, an impact project, and at the time, because the new investment company was being set up at that time, effectively that's been tasked to the new investment company. I'll retouch base to see whether that's now available. It wasn't available at the end of last year, but as I say, I it's not to say that we no doubt couldn't have an impact project here in Conwy, but routine investment in our normal assets, I doubt, are going to be attractive to the pension fund because they're not going to get the returns on that they need for their requirements.
Thanks for that, Amanda. Thank you, Councillor Gronwy, for the question. So next we've got Councillors Gareth, then Anne online, then Councillor Paul, then we're going to the recommendations. Councillor Gareth.
I suppose my concern with the report is, and I apologise if I've missed it, is that there doesn't seem to be much emphasis on that ongoing maintenance and running costs of any capital projects, because, as far as I'm concerned, we should do some accurate costings as we can over the lifetime cost of any capital project, so that we can, if we've built it, we can actually maintain it properly, and then Amanda and Gareth can actually build it into their budgets. If it's got a 20-year lifespan, you build it into your budgets, and then you've got if there's peaks and troughs within it, there's major spends after 10 years, you build it in, or do you actually average it out and put a sinking fund in so that we can actually maintain the stuff that we actually build, be it bridges, be it the sea defence works, from maintaining the structure to being, costing, how much is it going to cost to clear the sand? How much is it, when is it going to need painting? When do the railings need doing? So once we've got the money, we've built the capital item, that we actually look after it for future generations. And I don't think there's enough in this report, and we don't do enough of this lifetime costs, and that could come into the value for money as well, in that, you know, if you've built things out of cheaper materials, those lifetime costs could well be higher. And that, I think that's absolutely key and really, really important.
Thank you, Gareth. Come back, Amanda. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the scope of the work that Audit Wells did is out of our control in that context. I think to the substantive point about our assets in that sense, you know, it's a piece of work that we're doing, and I appreciate I've referenced it before, but it's a challenging piece of work really to try and essentially have that much better forward look of what our capital commitments are, so that, as you say, we have an anticipation of what that capital investment is, which covers not only using the different chunks of our capital program, as you say, in terms of our building assets. What does that mean in terms of maintenance going forward? Same with infrastructure, our vehicle replacement program. When does that fall if we're going to maintain the same fleet and all that kind of stuff? So that's a piece of work that we're advancing, and I think will be very relevant really in terms of setting that context of what is our capital ask going forward, because I think and also then the other angle of that is also around, in a way, being aware of what our ambitions are across services, because I think it sometimes feels, or certainly historically it's felt, that it's a little bit of first come first served. If you're the first one to put your proposal on the table, then it gets supported, when actually we should be, across all of our priorities, determine actually which are the ones that are the most important to us. So that piece of work's ongoing at the moment, and we'll be coming back with it at some point.
But as I said, I think it's a key point when we get the proposals for a capital project, there's an assessment of how much is it going to cost us to maintain and run this for the next 10 or 20 odd years, so that we know as a council what our commitment is. Thanks.
Dear Councillor Gareth. Councillor Anne online.
Thanks, Chair. My point is in reference to, there's no actual mention here of our council asset management plan, and I think that's a mission that we need to overcome, actually, because it's in progress is how I understand it, you know, as part of the asset management strategy group that we had. So there are multiple asset owners, and not all of those services have got an asset management plan. So there is a rolling programme of that happening. So it's very important to get that established, and there is a date for that. I think it goes beyond March 2027, as I recall, because otherwise, how can we prioritise within and across the council where the value for money is best obtained? So I think whatever the date for the complete production of the council's asset management plan needs to be an integral part of the actions that are referenced within this action plan. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Amanda?
Thank you, Councillor Anne. I agree with you in terms of the action. I guess, again, I would just make the point that this was a national study undertaken by Audit Wells, which didn't cover specific fieldwork at well, I think there was some generic fieldwork across all local authorities, but it specifically did explicit fieldwork in half a dozen or so authorities, and that didn't include Conwy. You know, the action plan here is merely us responding to the recommendations that Audit Wells have made in their report. It is not meant to be a holistic set of recommendations to do with how we internally are managing capital, because that's not what Audit Wells' report was addressing. So so I think, as you say, separately there are definitely actions we need to take forward in terms of how we manage and ensure that we consider capital in a holistic way, and we can pick that up. This action plan is merely in response to Audit Wells' report.
And if I could come back, is there any harm in customising it, which is obviously what we're doing, to our own needs, as well as responding to the detail that's within the report? Just seems a bit of an omission for me. And actually, we need every indicator to be shouting. We need an asset management plan to underpin the value for money decisions that we take year in, year out. Without that plan. Thanks, Amanda.
Yeah, I mean, I guess certainly no. I mean, obviously, in the context of how we respond to Audit Wales, then I would suggest we respond to Audit Wales in the context of their recommendations. But as you say, for our own purposes, yeah, no harm remotely in, as you say, expanding out an action plan to include other actions that we feel we want to take forward.
Thanks.
Dear Councillor Anne. And last, Councillor Paul, remembering the rule of 5.
Section 1.1 of the action plan, it says, but the underlying condition evidence needs strengthening to support prioritisation and long-term planning. And this builds on some of the aspects we're saying, really, and it builds on my issue, which I bang on about building capacity and capability. My best understanding is we don't have the capacity or the capability to provide this underlying condition evidence. And we have this very regularly. I would say school estates is a priority here because we don't fully understand the condition, the detailed condition of our schools, because we end up often reacting in an emergency way when something goes wrong. And we will have all been governors of schools where this has happened. We had an incident only this week, but we have regular incidents when we know the repairs and maintenance haven't been sustained over a long period, but we still don't have the hard evidence of the condition of something. And it seems to me that this should come. We said in how it's going to work, we're going to have something for April, but shouldn't we be building this in now if we're going to have it in April? So in the budget working groups, shouldn't we have a business case that says to us, we're going to employ an officer or whatever it is to build up this evidence base on the condition of our assets? That would seem to be logical. If it's in the business case that goes through the budget working groups, such a person, if that's the way to do it, would be available for us in the next financial year.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Paul. Obviously, the responses in here have been provided by other services and colleagues in other services. The one thing I would say is that the feedback that we've been given and the information that we've had is that the condition data is there, it's strong across all services, including schools. What we don't have is a consolidated register of that information. That's what's being talked about in terms of the improvement work going forward. Obviously, if those services feel there's a need in terms of capacity, then they will need to consider that in terms of their asks when it comes around to the revenue business case process.
So we do sorry.
Councillor,
yes. Can I just, Paul, respond in terms of, certainly you mentioned schools there having had the portfolio for so many years. We have backlog maintenance for all of our schools, and that's how we make a decision when that grant funding comes through. In terms of the maintenance grant, they're prioritised in order of what's needed. It's just obviously there isn't adequate funding to do everything that's needed on the list. But yeah, ERF conduct that. They have and have done for many years. We're aware of what the issue is, but you know, obviously you're mentioning in terms of spending capital. Well, we need to be able to, obviously we can all look at that and realise that maybe there's opportunity for changes in terms of the footprint of the schools, but it costs money. And I did raise that slightly with the Minister the other day, in part with other things, but they're going to look at that going forward in terms of capital. But there needs to be a programme, as was mentioned before. We last time looked at the MIM project, Garonmi mentioned it before, for the Sustainable Communities for Learning, but that then changed in terms of the threshold for that in order for the company that was appointed to do that to make money from it, then the threshold needed to be over, I think it was 65 million. And at that point, ours didn't qualify. We were around 43 million at that point. So there needs to be something that's looked at around that. I completely agree. And let's hope with a new government now that they will take opportunity. And I know they've mentioned something around the maintenance, and that's just specifically talking around schools, because you've mentioned it, Paul. But yeah, the evidence and the information's there. We can tell you in pounds exactly how much the backlog maintenance would cost for each of our schools, but it's a case of prioritising each year until there is adequate funding to make large scale change, because at the minute you're talking about capital funding where we need to find 35% of it, and that's considerable. To build a high school now, you're talking I think the most recent one in Flintshire was around 60 million, I think. So, you know, it's considerable, and that's only continues to increase. But yeah, that information is most definitely there. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, but why is it then, if we have a school boiler replacement plan and we have priorities within that, or we have a school roof replacement plan and we have priorities within that, why is it then, even within those priorities, you know, a school roof, something will go wrong and we'll have to close the school temporarily, or a school boiler breaks down and we'll have to put a new boiler in and the school's closed? Because in a sense, that's the issue. In a sense, we may have that plan, we know we've got limited money, but in a sense, are those priorities working for us?
Gareth, thank you.
No, thank you. Again, Councillor Paul, it does say in the action plan about the next step really is to develop a risk log, which will be considering what is, you know, likely to or potentially the higher risk stuff that could go wrong earlier, and obviously you'd look to alleviate that, as the leader had commented earlier, sooner rather than leaving it. So it does reference that in the pack.
Thank you.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Well, we're going to move to the recommendations now. I'd like to thank Carwyn for his input for his report and his input here. Housekeeping, we need the name again on the consultation engagement for this report. I sound like a broken record. Could I have a proposer and a seconder for this report, please? Councillor Nia. Somebody. It's nearly lunchtime. Councillor Chris, thank you very much. Okay, so we've had a proposer and a seconder. Could we open the vote, please? Nearly. Okay, well, we'll close. Can we close the vote, please? Oh, there we go. And that was carried unanimously. Thank you very much indeed, members. Thank you, officers. This has taken longer today, but some really good reports. So thank you to all, and safe journey home. Diolch.